What's something people don't know about old houses? They often hide secrets in the most unexpected places. The Peterson family had just moved into their new home. It was a big old house with a musty attic. 10-year-old Billy loved adventures, so naturally, the attic was the first place he wanted to explore. Billy's dad warned him to be careful. There might be nails sticking out, he said. But Billy didn't care. He was on a mission to discover the secrets of the attic. He pushed open the heavy wooden door. Dust particles danced in the single beam of sunlight coming through a crack in the wall. Cobwebs clung to everything like ghostly fingers. He coughed, waving his hand to clear the air in front of him. As Billy ventured deeper, his foot hit something hard. He bent down and brushed away the dust. It was a wooden chest, old and heavy. He lifted the lid slowly, his heart pounding with anticipation. Inside, beneath yellowed fabrics and brittle papers, lay a photograph. The photograph was faded, its edges brown with age. It showed a group of people, their faces serious and unsmiling. They wore clothes from another time, long dresses and stiff collars. One man stood out. He sat in the center, his eyes piercing through the years, seeming to stare right at Billy. Billy shivered. He couldn't explain it, but something about the photograph made him uneasy. He picked it up, his fingers brushing against the cold glass. The man in the center seemed to almost move. Billy shook his head, his pulse quickening. It was probably just his imagination. He took the photograph downstairs to show his family. "Look what I found," he exclaimed, holding it up. His parents gathered around, their faces filled with curiosity. "Who are they?" Billy's little sister Emily asked, her eyes wide with wonder. No one knew. The photograph held faces from the past, their identities lost to time. But one thing was certain. There was something strange about the picture, something that sent shivers down their spines. That night, Billy hung the photograph on his bedroom wall. As he lay in bed, he couldn't shake off the feeling that the people in the photo were watching him. The man in the center seemed to stare directly at him, his eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Billy woke up with a start. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He could hear whispers coming from the hallway outside his room. They were faint, almost inaudible, but definitely there. He got out of bed and crept towards the door. He slowly opened the door. The hallway was dark and silent. He strained his ears, but the whispers were gone. He went back to bed, trying to convince himself it was just his imagination. But deep down, a seed of unease had been planted. Something wasn't right. The next morning, Billy's mum complained of feeling cold. Even though it was a warm summer day, she couldn't shake off the chill. She wrapped herself in a blanket, her teeth chattering. "I just feel so strange," she said, her voice shaky. Strange events began to plague the family. Billy's dad, normally a calm and collected man, became short-tempered and irritable. He slammed doors and yelled at the dog. He couldn't sleep, complaining of nightmares that left him drenched in sweat. Emily, Billy's little sister, started seeing shadows lurking in the corners of her eyes. She would giggle nervously, pointing at the empty spaces. "Who's that?" she'd ask, her voice barely a whisper. One evening, while eating dinner, a glass flew off the table. It shattered against the wall, sending shards of glass flying across the room. The family stared at each other, their faces pale with fear. No one had been near the glass. It was as if an unseen hand had swept it away. Fear became a constant presence in the house. They whispered to each other, their voices hushed and filled with dread. What was happening? Was it the photograph? Had they brought something evil into their home? Billy became convinced that the photograph was cursed. He remembered the man in the center, his eyes burning with a strange intensity. He tried to convince his parents to get rid of it. "We have to throw it away," he pleaded, his voice trembling. But his parents dismissed his fears. "It's just an old photograph, Billy," his dad said, patting him on the head. "Don't be silly." But even as he said it, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. He, too, couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The events escalated. One night, Billy woke up to find his curtains on fire. He screamed, rushing to put out the flames before they could spread. His parents rushed into his room, their faces filled with terror. "What happened?" his mum cried, her voice shaking. Billy was certain it was the photograph. It was behind all of this, but he had no proof. And worse, his family was starting to doubt his sanity. He felt isolated, trapped in a nightmare that was slowly consuming them all. Desperate, Billy decided to take matters into his own hands. He snuck into the attic, determined to find out more about the photograph. He searched through the old chest, hoping for a clue, anything that could explain what was happening. At the bottom of the chest, beneath a pile of crumbling newspapers, he found a small, leather-bound diary. Its pages were brittle with age, the ink faded. He opened it carefully and began to read. The diary belonged to a woman who had lived in the house a century ago. She wrote about her family, her life, and a strange photograph that she believed was cursed. According to her, the photograph contained a trapped spirit, a malevolent entity that fed on the fear of others. But there was more. The woman had discovered a way to break the curse. She wrote about a ritual, a way to appease the spirit and release it from its photographic prison. Billy's heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. He finally had an answer, a way to save his family. He raced downstairs, the diary clutched tightly in his hand. He had to convince his family to trust him one last time.